I'm Andrew Catchpole, and welcome to our latest webinar, Social Responsibility at the Cellar Door, run in partnership with Bibendum. Now, much is said and written about environmental sustainability and climate change, but equally important as a pillar of sustainable advancement is the social side, the well-being and nurturing of the workforce and the wider community that any business inevitably exists in. Today, our panel focuses on what producers can and do deliver within and from their vineyards and wineries to enhance the lives of workers and communities, while also examining the broader value for those businesses that do embrace social responsibility. I'll ask our panel to introduce themselves in just a moment, but a word on the housekeeping front. The session will last approximately an hour. I'll try and keep it to that, and we welcome questions from the audience, which we'll endeavour to answer towards the end of the session. Okay, so let's meet our panel. Now I'll go top left around from my screen. Eleanor, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself?
Hello. Well, first, sorry, my voice is a little bit bad. My name is Elena Carretero. I'm Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Director at Santa Rita Winery in Chile. So I've been related to sustainability for a long time, before with the wines of Chile.
Okay, thank you. Marlies?
Hello, good morning. My name is Marlies Kleinsmit. I work for Jeroboam's as our brand manager. And so we've got 10 shops across London, and looking forward to being part of the discussion with such a cross-section of the industry.
Excellent, thank you. Ed?
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name's Ed Robinson. I work for the Co-op. Wine buyer at the Co-op, and amongst other things, I buy a fair trade range. I've been responsible for converting all our South African wines to fair trade over the last few years. So much looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. And Tertius?
Hi, I'm Tertius Bosov. I'm from Cellar Wine Estate. So it's one of the largest owned family wine estates in Stellenbosch. We were one of the pioneers back in the early 2000s to empower our workers, Black empowerment as we call it in South Africa, and shortly afterwards we became Fair Trade certified. So I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
And Cleo?
Hi, I'm Cleo Giudici, wine buyer for Bibendum and CNC Group, where sustainability is really at the heart of everything we do with CNC.
Fantastic. And last but very far from least, Jamie.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Avenall. I'm wine buying director for CNC Group, working with Cleo.
Excellent, thank you. Right, let's crack in. So my first question to the panel is, with regard to sustainability, what do we mean by social responsibility? What should and does this encompass? Now, obviously, it's quite a broad topic, but would anyone like to dig in and try and define it? Maybe we could hear from, maybe we'll hear from Tertius, maybe we'll hear from a producer point of view to begin with.
Yeah, it's quite a complex matter. I mean, it's not a one-trick pony, but I think it's an intentional action from a company beyond its legal obligations to really promote sustainability and ethical fairness inside the workforce. So if I need to summarize it like that, I think that's what it boils down to. So it's really that intentional action of going the extra mile beyond what the legal guys expect from you.
Yeah, does anyone want to add to that, or any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically everything a business does that impacts on people and the environment. You know, and as Tertius says, that's very much split into things that are, you know, legal obligations, but things that are things that a business wants to do as part of its activity.
So we're saying there's a legal safety net, but in fact it's going above and beyond that, as you
absolutely
said. Yeah. Eleanor, I think you were about to pitch in.
Yeah, for me it's one of the pillars of the sustainability, and it's like the table, you need the three. The social, I think today is the most important, because we have been seeing empires falling down because of the social problems, and now with politics. So social is to be related, is to be sustainable in time, not only with your workers, but also with your community. If you don't do it, you disappear. You're not going to be sustainable.
And that's important, I think, isn't it? Not just, yes, as you say, your own workforce, but also the broader community. I mean, Ed, as you say, I mean, you've been and the co-op has been very prominent, well, absolutely out front in terms of sort of investing in fair trade and so on for a long time. And I know that you have a very ethical buying policy. What are your thoughts on that?
For us, it's an extension of the origins of the co-op. The origins of the co-op go back to the 1840s and helping underprivileged working class people in the north of England and providing them with affordable, good quality offerings. Now, as a retailer, we've had a huge community involvement in this country over the years. Why wouldn't we do that with, why wouldn't we engage with overseas producers in the same way? Why would we expect, just because we're buying wines and goods from foreign lands, for the people who make those products, people behind them, not to enjoy the same standards that we do over here? So I think it's kind of etched into the framework of our business, really, as it is with several of us over here.
Yeah, so it might seem kind of obvious to us as to why social responsibility is important, but could we just sort of elaborate on it a little more? I mean, why don't we just all get on and do our own thing and let everyone else take care of themselves? It's you know, might sound like a sort of harsh prompt, but Marlies, you've got any views on that? Have attitudes changed as well? Why has this suddenly become, not suddenly become, but why has this developed into something that is important to our businesses and lives?
I mean, as the years go on and there's just so much awful news around, I think there's a demand from the consumer as well as each individual in our industry, I think, to see more engagement and people doing more rather than being bystanders. From a Jeroboam's perspective, as a business, we take, as part of sustainability, we take well-being very seriously. Of course, well-being of the people who are involved in making the wine and the wines that we import, but equally the well-being of all our employees across the business. So in the same way, we find it's such a crucial part of sustainability to make sure that the workforce is feeling supported, nurtured, all working together to achieve the greater good, whether that's on an environmental aspect or personnel.
I think that also tags in with what Elena said earlier. Social responsibility also have a different component to it, which is very similar, but it's different, and it's social accountability. So if I look at the past, I've been in the industry for about 25 years now, and if I look at how much we've become more accountable for our actions, this is not only spilled over from a quality perspective, but also now onto social responsibility and social accountability. If you drive into a winery, you always get this pristine impression of perfect 5-cardon wire vineyards, and the road is immaculate, and it leads to this beautiful winery with a beautiful site. But what's really going on behind the windows? And there's been this massive shift from consumers as well, that they want to know what's going on behind. Is there any imperfection in this perfection? And how can it really be this perfect if there's no social responsibility and accountability from the wineries? So that's quite important to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. And before we move on a little, Cleo, is there anything to add to what we've said so far about what we mean by social responsibility and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, joining Tertius about the accountability, I think as an importer, you know, we are accountable about our impact on the society and the environment. We are responsible for working with social responsible producers. And we, as a business, we also contribute to the global social equity, helping to improve the livelihoods, the community of the communities, you know, around the world, really.
Okay, so maybe sticking with the producers for a moment, and if we could possibly draw on examples, what are the actual challenges and practicalities of implementing such advances for the workforce, so for the team at the surrounding the winery? Where do you start, and how do you progress? What sort of practically do you need to do to sort of advance on the social sustainability side?
Okay, Elena, if I can maybe just cut in. I think the first thing is this needs to be an informed decision of the company, but it's not only an informed decision of the company, it's also an informed decision of all the employees and the community that it's affecting. So for us, the biggest thing is everyone needs to buy into this. So from the CEO down to the guy washing the floors, down to the community that it affects, it needs to become a lifestyle. It's like doing a food grade standard audit. It doesn't help if you tick a few boxes that it's okay and the audit comes in and you get a blue light from someone and yay, it's all okay. It doesn't work like that. Especially not with social responsibility and accountability. The whole workforce, the team behind them and their families need to buy into this. So that's quite the first thing that's really difficult. And then the second thing is, I mean, if you look at the complex regulatory compliances that you need to adhere to, so in South Africa, we basically have a system called VITA, which is the Wine Industry Ethical Trade Initiative. That covers ethical trade and also ethical sourcing and social responsibility towards workers. But then there's something else as well, which is a more international standard like fair trade. And it is a really complex system to adhere to, and there's lots of stuff that you need to set in place to be able to do that. So that spills over then into cost and resource constraints. I mean, except for our HR manager, we had to appoint someone, in addition, like Elena, for example, only looking after social responsibility inside the workforce, because it's not an 8 to 5 job, it's a 24/7 job. So that's from my side. Elena, I don't know, what do you say?
Well, for us, is first the internal people, depends on where you are and what they need. For example, in Chile, we are in a country that is underdeveloped. So there is things for the internal people that are very important, like education and health. So one of the things that we always try to help them is on these two that, is education and health, and always related with the family. So this is for the internal. But for the community, the other aspect that I consider that is very important in sustainability, it's part of the core business of this wine culture. That is because we are growing and the cities are growing. This wine culture is close to disappear a little bit in some parts. So you need to create the sense of pride and the sense of local development in the wine culture, in the multifunctionality of the agriculture. So what we are doing with the community is to help them to develop in a local basis with the essence of the territory. That kind of project is called territorial valorization. So at the end, what you get is that they can continue, they can stay being sustainable in the same activity of the wine culture, because you are aiding them to do it.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to add any thoughts on that? Because we've all seen, and there was, I think I like that sort of illustration. I mean, you gave us, Tertius, an image of South Africa, but it could be Chile, it could be elsewhere. You have this immaculate drive. You go through the lovely white gates, and there's a big house at the end. The winery popped behind it, and then you see some of the local communities, and obviously there's a sort of a big sort of quite often economic imbalance. Division of wealth and so on, but then you also see some of the fantastic projects that are going on around the world. So I think, Eleanor, you've kind of touched on it, but aside from the straightforward sort of ethical considerations and human decency, could we dig a little deeper into the sort of demonstrable benefits for a company of embracing, for producers of embracing social responsibility, social sustainability?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when we first became fair trade certified in the old days, the buyer of Bivendum was Ian Mugger. And he said to me, Tertius, list a few projects that you're doing and what are you doing for social responsibility? So I listed a few, and I talked about primary and secondary and tertiary education, and I talked about a creche, and then I mentioned a soup kitchen. And he was like, why do you mention a soup kitchen? Isn't that supposed to be standard? And I think that's what Elena touched as well. It's very community driven and community. It's directed towards a specific community. And even if you're as a singular winery try and do something. You're affected. For us, we're affecting the community and a workforce of about 300 people with their extended families, etc. But you're only scratching the surface in South Africa. I mean, I said to someone the other day that the farming community in South Africa is probably one of the poorest communities in agriculture, and it's not only wine. It crosses over into fruit, etc. And if you're willing from a company to do that social step and that social accountability step, then it's a-okay. But we also need to look at the broader picture of the whole environment when you look at South Africa's workforce from agriculture, etc., and also their social responsibility. So, but for us, I mean, the last few years, there's a good turnover of fair trade funds, which helps with social responsibility. It's not only based on that, but we've been able to put a creche for the small children, so they look after. We're busy with an old age home so that the retired people on the farm stay on the farm. And I think one of the most wonderful things is education. So we've been able to put people, I mean, secondary education funds come standard for the workers and their employees, but then the most important thing is tertiary education. That's the exciting bit. So usually in South Africa, a farm child would have become a farm worker. It's that evil cycle. But now we're able to say, okay, in the last few years, we've got a qualified nurse coming out of the farm. We've got some teachers coming from the farm. We've got guys in marketing, and we're able to upscale them and put them in on a different side of the business. So it's really about upliftment, but that starts from the ground up and from an informed decision from the company and the people and the community to do that. So yeah, that's just a few examples from what we've been doing.
You're doing fantastic, yeah. Does anyone want to add to that? Because I'd quite like to bring some of the importers and retailers in a moment. Are there any other examples that any of you might highlight?
I think, I mean, you know, Tertius's example is a great one, and South Africa is a country where it's where the need for social upliftment and help in that area is probably maybe greater than any of the countries we buy wine from, and is maybe more visible. I think, you know, I'll give a different example, and I was just talking to one of our the cooperatives we work with in France the other week, and I think the French cooperative model, or the cooperative model at its heart, actually is about looking after and working with the local community. And just talking to Toutiac, who are one of the co-ops we work with in Bordeaux, and they're talking about, you know, the number of families that, you know, that are directly associated with and rely on them as a business to support them. And so that's 1,300 families, you know, just involved in that one business. About how they train young winemakers coming up, about how every year they have training and qualification contracts and apprenticeship contracts that they offer out to people locally. The vineyard R&D that they do to make you know, to make what they do in the vineyard not only safer but better and more forward thinking for the future. So I think the French co-op model is, you know, at its best, is actually rooted in looking after the community.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Okay, so as importers and retailers, I sense there's been something of a sort of sea change or a gathering of momentum in terms of the importance that that importers and retailers to the consumers actually place on all forms of sustainability, of course, in the current environment, but social sustainability as well. And gradually, I want to talk a little bit later about how to communicate this to consumers and what the benefits may be of that. But what's sort of driving that change, and you know, in your own sort of import businesses and in your retail outlets? Who'd like to sort of pick up on that?
I'm happy to. I think when our retail team have got people popping into the shop and wanting to strike up a conversation, you know, typically someone might walk in looking for a Chianti or something, and the chat may in the past have really revolved around the press and the achievements of said wine and winemaker, whereas these days the interest and intrigue from that we've kind of heard from the retail staff. People want to know what's happening at the winery. You know, it's not just whether they're maybe asking for organic or biodynamic, but also they like to talk about what good things are happening within these regions where the producers are making their wines. So we're noticing that more, speaking to our consumers in our stores, and you know that's echoed in our buying policies, things that we do kind of on an HR level. So so taking the conversations that are happening with the end consumer, it really validates what we do as a business, working with family producers who have these excellent case studies of supporting their communities. And when we're now training our teams, we know that they're very engaged. If we have these anecdotes and these great examples of what our wineries are doing, they are equipped with these like a lineup of producers that they can point our consumers towards. You know, take a look at this bottle. These people are doing this amazing thing, driving the conversation in store in that direction. You know, I suppose the news, people are reading more about it and want to talk more about it, and we're equipping our retail team with much more, well, directing them to the right wines that tick those boxes, because we care, but it's also very valid.
Yeah, and do you just say, forgive me if I missed this, but is it something that's kind of enshrined in your buying policy, or is it simply an encouragement for all within the company to sort of follow best practice exercise?
Well, a bit of both, really. The buying policy has always been very much attuned to small family producers, and I find often that comes hand in hand with this, you know, topic. So yeah, we it's already there, and we're working towards further in that direction. Just always wanting to be better, but you know, if we're speaking to new producers, making sure that, of course, they're following or making grand steps in the right direction where they're not already doing best practice.
Yeah, and I'm aware that you know, we are aware that Jeroboam's this is very deep rooted, and it does shape a lot of your buying and your ethos and so on, which is great. Ed, slightly different, I suppose, scale and shape of retailer, co-op, but what's the story there? Why? Well, you said the very ethos of the co-op, obviously, to begin with, but could you perhaps elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, it is ingrained in our DNA, if you put it that way, and that's been that way for a while. So we're fully behind fair trade. We're there right at the start of fair trade. It goes obviously beyond fair trade, clearly, but beyond that, I agree with the previous comments. There's a lot of consumer pull here. There's a lot of consumer interest and demand for this, and that's something which has really increased over the years. We've seen it in the sales figures. One of my favourite, I half jokingly say, at any given consumer wine tasting, after about an hour, a third of your audience is very heavily engaged. A third is perhaps had a little bit too much to drink, and a third are perhaps talking with their friends. If you give I find when I give a fair trade tasting, honestly, you can hear a pin drop all the way through. Everybody's really, really interested. And if you listen to some of the examples which Tertius gave a while ago about the creches, the educational facilities and so on, the various opportunities which sustainable trade brings, this really resonates with the customer, really resonates with the customer indeed. And we see, for example, if we've got 50 odd wines which fall into that socially sustainable bracket, if you like. If any of those are out of stock, the customer tends to stay within that range. A sizable chunk of those sales, they go nowhere else. People just shop that category. So it's really fascinating, and that's really, despite, we'll come on to communication later. There's as you say, but there's a lot of people who wine is an indulgent product. It's for a grocer like us. it's one of the most expensive things in the basket. For the daily shop, wine is a premium product, and I think it's quite nice to see that people, if they're paying £6 or £7 for a bottle of wine at the entry level, they're very happy to make a choice which then has a positive impact on others in a different country.
Yeah, it's interesting. How much benefit do producers on the panel feel from this, or as I'm thinking, as the consumers shopping in, whether it's a Jeroboam's or Co-op, or there are other good stores available in the UK, but obviously you've invested a lot in this. Is the message getting right through to the shelf, or is it more that you're safe in the knowledge you're doing the right thing, and especially in this day and age, I suppose it would be pretty easy to be called out quite widely if indeed you weren't socially responsible. It seems like quite a lot of what are the benefits that come all the way back to you from this rising sort of consumer interest? I suppose, is it just as simple as, you are part of the portfolio across the world in various kind of, retailers, and you may not be there because the tide has turned if you weren't embracing social responsibility? Do you want to try and tackle that?
Difficult question. I think the first thing would be that, and it's again that informed decision, like with the company to do social responsibility. It's the same with a retailer. They need to make that decision. Are you going to support it? I had a very interesting tasting a few months ago, and this actually came up, and we said, okay, so where do you want to retail it at? And the retailer gave the retail price and said, but how fair is that? So from that perspective, they also need to buy in that people need to make a living, and everyone's saying, so your minimum wage is so low, how can you do that? But eventually, every retail shelf pricing, and that's really important, that I think we can, if we can somehow put that through to a consumer or a customer, every retail price shelf has an effect on the buying price of the wine, and the buying price only justifies this kind of limit of social life and sustainability. Yeah, it's if they make the decision to support it, it's wonderful, and then it makes our life much easier. But it is really, it lies with the retailer to make a decision, like Co-op or like Jeroboam's, to say, okay, we're going to support this, we're going full scale, this is our plan, and we support social responsibility. From an impact perspective, we see the benefit. We do. The workforce see the benefit as well. The simple example that I didn't mention previously when I said about the question stuff is, for example, access to healthcare as well. This has opened up channels. So if a consumer lifts that bottle off the shelf, I've actually thought of putting a QR code on the back label of some of the wines so that you can actually put a face to it. Because if you buy a wine that's sustainably certified, social sustainably certified, or take, for example, I'm mentioning fair trade again, or you can put a Vita seal on the label or whatever, what does it really say to the consumer? Do they know the lives that they touch? I made a little video in a presentation the other day to a retailer. Actually, just all that I did is I flicked through 100 photos with names of people that they're affecting and lives that they're affecting. And if you're able to transfer that message to a consumer, you would really touch them, and they would know why they're actually having to spend maybe a little bit more money, or why they want to support this farm because it's socially accountable, and personalize it. Everyone loves personality. I mean, there's such a lot of wines out in the market. I always say, when I started way back, you either had good wines or you had bad wines. Now these days, you've got good wines and you've got average wines. So what's going to distinguish you so that a consumer picks your wines from a shelf and make that decision? And it's always about the story, and it's not only a story, it's truth. And if you communicate that truth and that personification of the people's lives that they're affecting, that's when you're really touching the consumer, and that you have success with social sustainability in the form that it will be consistent and will be a way of living.
Yeah, Cleo or Eleanor, do you want to add anything to that in terms of how perhaps you, as coming from the producer side, can actually help convey these messages all the way along the sort of supply chain. And then there was some nodding from the importers on the panel. So then we'll flip over to them and see what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, we really try to support the suppliers to guide them on, you know, what message to put, for example, on labels. So, for example, with all our suppliers, we work in off-trade, that kind of making available a video or augmented reality experience or things like that is today quite important, I think, in off-trade. In regard to on-trades, we're doing also our little bits with our events. So our latest Bibendum portfolio event was all about, the theme was origins testing. So it was all about sustainability, highlighting you know, organic farming, biodynamic farming, but not only, also giving back to the people, native grape varieties, and all sorts of angle of the sustainability aspect. So yeah, I would say we try to do all our support with social media events, and working closely with suppliers on bringing that message across.
So important, obviously, for you to work hard to ensure that your suppliers are in a position, and their accounts who are coming along to, or prospective accounts coming along to the tastings, to really impress those stories, those messages, and get them out there. And I think that's probably fairly true.
Absolutely.
Eleanor, is this a law of diminishing returns, or is there anything that you'd like to add there?
Yeah, no, you know, that related to the education, I think if we are saying that we need local development, because if local development is not there, we are not going to be developed. We need the people participating in that. So the benefit is when you really do that, the people make proud and work in the activity, then they can do the local development. And there is one tool that we are using for everything, that is the wine tourism. Okay. Because it's the way that you can show what you are doing in your community. So it's the way that also you can promote the local development. So, and that can speak by themselves, you know, so it's very hard to get with the message to the consumer with the videos, but when you get the people to the place and you saw the wine tourists, they can realize that is true. So that's where we have been working a lot. Since the last 12 years, we have been working with the kids in the school that is in front of us for doing this local development related to the wine culture. So they are part of us. So when the people is coming, even when they are getting older, because it's 12 years ago, now they are doing some own business for wine tourism. So I think it's the link that we should use, because other way, it's very hard to communicate with a video, with something.
That's a fantastic resource if you can do that, and the word Cellar also within our title for this session. So yeah, an absolutely great resource for using those, which obviously works for those who can manage to get to a winery, and that's great. But obviously many can't, and then the importer, distributor, and retailer has to come in, presumably, and carry those messages. So how does that work? I mean, let's take an example of tastings, another interactive activity with the trade in the UK. But again, a couple of nods around the table. How do you best promote and carry those messages through to your audience here? Who'd like to pick that up first? Marlies?
Yep, sure. So the word education keeps coming up throughout this discussion, and I think that is so key, the education and the communication from an event, you know, a trade event or a retail event, where we are making it very clear. For example, I think Cleo, you mentioned you had a trade tasting where you kind of earmarked you know, wines of the organic section and things like this. We'll do the same. We just had a big client tasting in September where we themed our tables a bit differently this year. We didn't kind of go by country, but we had a whole table for the kind of the pioneers of this, and you know, exactly that, highlighting the people who are giving back to the community, steering our customers to an entire table full of these wines, not necessarily having to go through the countries, picking out the odd wine here and there that carries this qualification, but here's a full table or two of wines that will speak to you. So then we're communicating to our customer that here are these wines, and then we're making sure that in that case we've got a Jeroboam's representative and or someone from the winery present in the room to educate and communicate to the people tasting those wines. I think it's so important as both an importer and a retailer to get that communication right on so many levels, whether it's face to face, because that's when you're really engaging with a person. But many methods, other channels that we reach all types of customers, whether that's equipping our trade sales team with exactly the information that they need to go out and share with their customers, and making sure that we've, as a retailer, have got very finely tuned small bits of engaging information that captures our consumer, because as you said previously, you know, we don't want to overwhelm anyone. We want to have a short but sweet, captivating information that speaks to the people looking for wines that encompass social responsibility and accountability. So making it as easy as possible for whether it's a trade customer or an end consumer, someone in the shop, putting it in front of their face so it's served up on a platter. Here you go. And the challenge is in finding the best way to do that succinctly, because you can't condense so much information and such hard work across the industry into something that maybe a consumer has got a few seconds to register and make the purchase.
I think that's key, isn't it? Because that's very similar in a way to simply communicating wine in terms of the intrinsic qualities of the liquid in the bottle, and maybe the story behind it to consume any story, not a sustainability piece, where they like one quick sort of soundbite takeaway, don't they? But it's got to be an interesting and useful piece of information. But to give too much information, and you tend to get a sort of fatigue, I think. I mean, Jamie, you're nodding. Is it very similar?
Yeah, I think, I mean, communication is definitely one of the key challenges when it comes to anything like this, where you're, you know, as an importer, you're dealing with, you know, 400 producers all around the world who will all be doing a myriad of different things and loads of fantastic things around this, but condensing that down into a message that you can give to a customer is quite tough. Now, obviously, you can do all of that soft stuff around tastings and social media, where you can get to, you know, small or sometimes larger numbers of people with that message. But I think what's important for us as well, and both there's a big business that needs to demonstrate compliance, but also as a business where something like this is ingrained within what we do and what we feel as a business. As well as all of that softer stuff, we also have a code of conduct that every supplier that we work with signs up to agree to minimum standards and minimum ways of working with these things. Now, in reality, lots of producers that we work with go way over and above that, but it's important for us to have that element of compliance and a benchmark of, you know, of where we start from when it comes to things like this. It's also really important because increasingly now, when we're going into tenders and conversations with big on-trade businesses, part of the tender submission is to demonstrate what we're doing in this kind of area, both in terms of social responsibility, but then in terms of what a wider environmental impact and what we're doing around that as well. And so we need to be able to clearly demonstrate to those customers what we're doing in a simple way, which something like a code of conduct does, and then we can bring in those additional layers of examples of what people are doing to supplement that. But I think certainly, it's and it's even more difficult when you come to consumer level, because we can pass that message to the on-trade businesses that we work with, and we can demonstrate what we're doing and what our producers are doing and our level of compliance around that. But then going that next level and letting the consumer know, so that the consumer can make a choice about what they're buying, is way more difficult.
Yeah, no, sure. Ed, you're nodding, and I want to come back to compliance, actually, because I think it's another big topic that we should absolutely touch on, sort of up and down or all along the supply chain and all the partners therein. Ed, you were nodding again. You're at the you're consumer facing, at the coal face, however you want to put it, dealing with the great wine loving public across the country. What thoughts on that communication and how to ensure that it's effective and compelling, as opposed to an overload and, dare I say, becomes a little tiresome?
It's a really live topic for us. I won't pretend that we've got the answer to it, to be honest, yet, but we're working very hard on it. We're a large retailer. We've got 2,500 stores, 50,000 store colleagues, which is arguably our greatest strength. It presents some real challenges to us, to be quite frank. We can't be in each of those stores hand selling the products. We can't be training all those store staff in terms of what lies behind the label, where the products come.
Oh, we've lost you briefly, Ed.
So am I back now?
You're back now, yeah. Hi.
So I do apologise. It must be the Wi-Fi signal at my end. I don't know if my video's started. I'll continue. Hopefully the video will come back.
We can hear you. There you go. You're fully back.
My apologies for that. What I was saying was, that strength comes with some challenges, and so we're, as a retailer, we're really heavily dependent on the label, which is quite small. So we're redesigning all our labels now to really make those stories really front and center. We'll be depicting them on the front label. We've got a very limited amount of space on the back label to tell the stories. We've got other assets such as QR codes. I'm not sure how post-COVID how relevant those are now, but I think I was nodding along with Tertius earlier on, and with Elena as well, in terms of what they were saying. And I think for us to have any hope of getting the communication effective, you need to be working with the right producer. So Tertius was talking about crash facilities and so on. They sense a middle class, don't they, to the uninitiated over here. But what they mean in South Africa, to his workforce, is, well, that means an extra income stream. That means mum can go to work. Means nourishment for the children.
Yes.
Being able to explain that is not a straightforward topic, but being able to work with the right producer who is in it for the right reasons and can list, and I'm sure Tertius and Elena will be able to list dozens and dozens of people who they know personally have been benefit from these initiatives. That makes a huge difference. There are just as there's a range of retailer approaches here. There's also a range of producer approaches as well. We work with people who they realise the commercial benefits as well of being set up like this. The wines are more commercially relevant now than they ever have been. They reserve their best wines for customers who sell them in a sustainable way, and then we try and create a virtuous cycle. So people get a wine which they like, they read about it, they like what they read, they're more inclined to buy it again, tell their friends, and that's really been that's what's been happening with us for quite a while. So we're keen to keep that momentum going, but communication is forever a challenge.
Yeah, so that's I just have a shout out to our lovely audience out there. If you do have any questions, do pop them in the Q&A box. So I'm aware that time is running, and we will endeavour to answer. But that ties. We mentioned compliance before as well. So Ed, picking up from you, so we're beginning to see producers actively say, right, I wish to place my wines or my best wines with X or Y or Z because of their own policy. And we're seeing, importers wishing to work, and retailers who are importing as well, wishing to work with with socially responsible producers, we're seeing an upswell with consumers. So it all sounds like a virtuous circle, and that is continuing and sort of deepening, if you like, that interest. On the Jamie, you mentioned compliance. How do we all police all of this? How do we know that? How do we ensure that what we're told, we don't just take it sort of face value, that you know, X producer is actually doing what they say, that it's not kind of whatever the social equivalent of greenwash is. And surely that's very important. I mean, it would be absolutely scandalous and undermine consumers or the consumers' confidence quite heavily if you know, stuff was exposed to be untrue.
I mean, I guess there's a couple of things within that. I mean, we've got a whole technical team within our business that visits a large percentage of our suppliers on an ongoing basis. So, you know, it's not just a case of believing what's written on a piece of paper. You know, we go visit people, we see people. That's not just our technical team, but that's also, you know, our buying and our wine agency marketing team as well. Bigger businesses that we work with might have what they're saying certified. So, you know, there's bodies like Equalitas and SEDEX where you know, they're designed to check these things and to also offer, you know, guidance of how you can improve what you're doing in these areas as well. So, you know, that's not going to be appropriate for everybody, because any kind of compliance initiative like that involves time, paperwork, money, ultimately. And so, you know, bigger wineries can do that kind of thing to both help them monitor and improve in these areas. Obviously, smaller wineries are not necessarily going to be equipped to do that kind of thing, and so it is more of a personal, face-to-face approach.
Yeah, no, sure. Yes, sorry, Eleanor, were you?
Yeah, no, that related to this message, I think it was, and it's so hard to get with a message in a label in a few seconds, or in a video, in a QR code or whatever. So, but in the other side, the consumer wants to have more info, and they are more related to the compliance, the real compliance. So sometimes it's not only because the communication of the marketing in the labels, but it's also because you have to do, for example, the real reporting. For example, the GRI report. That is nothing that you are going to show in a label, but it's something that you're going to have on your web or on your compliance, and you know, all the memories or whatever. And the consumers sometimes are going to look for that. So I think we need to do both. We need to catch the attention of the consumers with the small things, but also we have to do the homework with this reporting, as for example, the GRI or others, that are really, really a more formal thing to tell about the sustainability and the social things that you are doing.
So it's really up to, we're saying it's up to everyone along the supply chain to do their bit, but also to ensure that your credentials are visible, that what you're doing transparently, and you're managing to communicate that. Yeah. We're a quiet audience today. Not berating you, but as I say, any questions? But I think we've covered a lot of ground. I don't know if there are any other points that anyone would like to raise, but I thought maybe I'd go around and ask you for a little sort of a summary, if you like, or what you feel the key points are that both your takeaways from the discussion and that we would obviously like the audience and those who later watch the recording to take away. So back to our title, social responsibility at the cellar door. Cleo, should we begin with you? Is that putting you on the spot?
Yeah, I mean,
what are your sort of key points or points that you'd like to like the audience to be taking away from this?
You know, I think really coming out of COVID-19, for example, people have you know, the trend on social responsibility really increased, and people are really conscious about health, environment, and community well-being. So for me, those 3 points are the main one that we're talking about at the moment, and the 3 points that are extremely important to us. But as a business, we're also doing a lot of work. We haven't talked about it today, but about reducing our CO2 levels as well, for example. Looking into our packaging, all those things that make some little change as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Eleanor, what sort of summing thoughts for us?
Well, I think we need to continue to do it, even if we cannot send the message to the final consumer. It has to be done, and it has to be done in serious, And sustainability is the three. I mean, it's environmentally friendly, social, equitable, and economically viable. That is also very important. So we cannot be crazy about all these things and spend a lot of money in giving message to the consumer, because it's not going to be viable, economically viable. So we need to have this balance between the three and be honest, and having this kind of tools, reportings, and that are available for everybody to continue doing the work.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question, so I'll just interrupt going around the panel at the moment for a question thank you, Lara Sills. Lara's asking, are you seeing a consumer demand or understanding for B Corp certification? Who'd like to pick that up? Is anyone want to jump on that? I don't want to go down thank you for the question. I don't want to go down a massive discussion about B Corp, but increasingly we ran a webinar very recently. In fact, it's the most recent one up on the Harpers YouTube channel is around B Corp and the benefits thereof. Is B Corp
I think I'll jump in and just say, I think one of the challenges with lots of areas of sustainability is that there's so many different bodies and certifications that the challenge is, and all of them have got their own merits, but when it comes down to consumer level, ultimately the 99.9% of consumers are not going to understand what these different bodies and certifications mean. And so I think one of our greatest challenge is the myriad of different certifications and getting a consumer to understand what they are, let alone for us to understand what they all are as people that work within the industry.
Yeah, it is. I admit it's very difficult to keep up. When we started the Harpers Sustainability Charter, I went in thinking I had some reasonable knowledge of sustainability overall as a concept, and very quickly realized how little I knew, but also this profusion, which can lead to a confusion of different accreditations and so on, is really difficult. And Jamie, that's really important. Comes back all the way to what we were saying about it. In a way, you just need a simple message to be able to get across to both your trade partners and the end consumers. That can be, for want of a better word, sold all the way through quite successfully.
I totally agree.
Yes.
What you've both just said, Jamie and Andrew. From my understanding, it does seem that B Corp is a very big player in the kind of consumer friendly and trade friendly certification. I do think there's a recognition of the all-encompassing benefit of B Corp, and I am seeing more not demand, but just more conversation around it in the consumer sphere. But there are, as you said, many bodies certifying many different things. It's hard to put your finger on the best one, but I think B Corp's up there.
Yes, I think that's probably a very nice way of putting it. I mean, we would possibly concur at Harpers just in terms of the number of companies out there in the broader wine and spirit world that are becoming B Corp, and it does seem to be reasonably widely recognized, even if people, as perhaps Jamie, you were suggesting, people don't actually understand exactly what it stands for. It's the brand, for want of a better way, is sort of slightly out there. Marlish, did you want to also any sort of summarizing thoughts about everything we've discussed? We've covered quite a lot of ground, to be honest.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the point about price, and I think it's so important for the consumer to recognise what they are paying for, and if they're wanting to make a socially responsible purchase, there is that trend of people are spending more, drinking perhaps less but better. It absolutely applies from a socially responsible point of view as well, and for people to really be aware that they want to pay a bit more for a bottle, that extra pennies or pounds is benefiting a wonderful winery who's investing in the community and the well-being of its workers. So yeah, I think making people aware of price and being willing to part with a bit more money for a very important good cause.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a really good point, and I meant to come to that actually. So I'm really glad that we've got that out there. I had omitted to mention it earlier. Ed, some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think social responsibility within wine. I have to check myself whenever I do a consumer tasting, because the lack of understanding of it, as has already been mentioned, it's seen as rather an abstract concept. Something vaguely good happens to somebody somewhere, but we're not really sure how or what. I think one ace card which wine has up its sleeve is its provenance. Provenance is very attractive, and we can all jump on a plane to Stone Rust or Santa Rita and see firsthand the wonderful things which should go on, the dedication to it, and the real tangible difference this makes to thousands of people's lives. We hang our hat at the Co-op on third-party standards. I think there's a lot of faith in those. As has been said, some have their challenges, and there's no perfect standard, I don't think. But they all have their merits. You're quite right to say that. And I think there is a lot of faith in those. Sometimes it's blind faith. People don't necessarily understand, or some people don't really have the enthusiasm to actually learn more, which is fine. But we've got a product here which I think arguably, unlike other foodstuffs in a grocery environment, can really carry it very, very well. By which I mean, you can link a bottle of wine to the vineyard in a way which is not quite so easy with tea, coffee, sugar, for example, with their blended. And these wine makes its way onto the dinner table in the way that few other product packaging does. So it can be very, very, and it's an emotional product. So I think it's in pole position really to demonstrate socially ethical credentials in a way which very few other grocery items are. So I think it's beholden on us to really make the most of that between us, supplier, importer, retailer level, whatever our link in that supply chain, to really get that cohesive story across, because there's some absolutely wonderful things going on in this area.
Yeah. And again, I think a great point, as you say, because wine is an emotive vehicle, and we actually pop it on the table in front of us, as we don't with many other products, I suppose, for want of a better word. Tertius, you've heard a lot over the last hour. What do you make of it all? What would be your parting shot?
If I have to put myself into a buyer's position or a retailer's position, it actually tags along with being the producer as well. See, take for example, if I'm not a great fan of wasabi, don't shoot me for it, but I love sushi, but I'm not a great fan of wasabi. And you can put any label on wasabi and make it how great from the outside. Wasabi will still taste like wasabi. So I think that the retailers and the guys putting it off shelf have and the imports have a massive responsibility to get the right juice in there, because eventually wine is juice. It's juice. It is what is inside the bottle. And then as buy-selling point, because the consumer, I don't really think that eventually after the third or the fourth bottle that they'll stick to it, even though it's social responsible wine or whatever, they'll stick to the juice if it's good. So from a producer perspective, we need to make sure that what we produce and put inside the bottle justifies the message of social sustainability and responsibility and accountability that we want to carry across. Because otherwise we're only going to do it for 3 bottles maybe, and not for 6 bottles. So that's my last bit.
Yeah, I think that's very important. The product, the juice, as you say, has to be right. I mean, interestingly, I've done it as a very anecdotal experiment and popped into the co-op and compared the fair trade labels with other fairly equal price wines, and I think it's probably fair to say they actually over deliver. So it's getting that right is absolutely crucial, isn't it? Otherwise, all other messaging around kind of fades if the juice in your glass ain't good. That's all the consumers will remember. So yeah. Jamie, final comment for you. Have we said it all, or is there a possibility?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is that in working with like-minded producers, we need to make sure that the issues around everything that we've talked about today are just part of our ongoing conversations, and that we're holding each other to account to how we're improving what we're doing in these areas. And it's also, we've talked a lot about what our producers are doing and how we're holding producers to account, but it's also about what we as importers do as well. It's about what we're doing at our cellar door. So as an example, CNC have a partnership with The Big Issue that where we work on a number of things with them to try and support the issues around homelessness. And one of those things would be that we have a recruitment pathway to bring people who are selling The Big Issue into our business. So we've got a commitment to recruiting 45 people by 2025 into our business from that. So it's also about what we're doing at home as well as what producers are doing in their homes. It's we're all equally accountable.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you very, very much all. It's been a very interesting discussion. I look forward to actually going back through it. So I'm doing a write-up as well for those who prefer to read rather than watch. Recording of this for the audience. Thank you for tuning in, and do spread the word. Anyone who missed it, this will, after a light edit, be up on our YouTube channel in a few days' time. I won't predict exactly which day, but do share that as well. And hopefully it's been of interest. Certainly been of interest to me, and we've covered a lot of ground. So let's all go away and continue to progress the conversation around social responsibility at the cellar door, and indeed the kind of the wider piece right across our lovely trade. So thank you very much all. Good to see you.
Thank you. All the best.
So
Thank you.